How do I look? If I don't sound good, how do I look? No, just kidding. Oh, thank you. That's sweet of you. I should put on this shirt, but this is a shirt that we have now for our church family when we have events like the carnival yesterday. So we had all the volunteers wearing this so they could identify who is from the church. And so we're making these available to whoever would like them. We're selling them for $10. You don't have to buy them, but we're just using this as an opportunity to talk about our church and pray even for opportunities to speak about why you love the church. Why do you love this church? But more than that, why do you love the Church of Jesus Christ? So it's one opportunity that we think might be helpful for you in terms of talking about Jesus with others. We're going to be talking and continue about our series, and I want to talk to you about fences for a minute, because the fences come in all kinds of sizes and shapes and styles and colors and all kinds of things. You have really high fences, you have really short fences, you even have invisible fences to keep your pets in, and sometimes you see these fortress fences, right? Like they are just protecting any intruder from coming in. Because really that's the bottom line. Fences really are designed to do one thing. That's either to keep something in or to keep something out, right? That's the purpose of fences. Growing up in the small community of Vineland when I was a little guy, in the late 60s, there were no fences between our neighbors, which was great because then we could walk across our neighbor's yard without even thinking about the consequences of that and go to the field where we could play some sports and that kind of thing. But eventually they caught on to the idea that we probably should put fences to keep these pesky neighbor kids out of my property, and so that started happening, and eventually our backyard had, the fences around so that we were unable to do that anymore. There was a time, though, that I was very thankful that we had that fence there, because the neighbor to one of our sides had a great big, huge, giant St. Bernard, and I think his name was Killer, and I was terrified of him, especially. I actually enjoyed mowing the lawn. I asked my dad, as a 7, 8, 9-year-old kid, I actually wanted to mow the lawn. I was one of those weird guys. And so I was mowing the lawn in the backyard, and I was terrified of always mowing the lawn beside this fence, because inevitably this great big huge killer dog came and bounded up and started barking his head off, and I thought for sure I was going to get my leg ripped off or something. But I was thankful for the fence in that time. Then later on, as I grew up, I went to live on a hobby farm. So our parents had 15 acres of property where we had some horses and a cow, some chickens and that kind of thing. We didn't have any fence around our yard, but we had fence around our fields to keep the animals inside our property. But every once in a while, you have a breakout, escape, right? So we had one of our cow actually, I don't know if he broke through or there was a hole in the fence. I'm still not sure, but he got loose, or she got loose, sorry. I do know that the cow is a female. Anyways, and it got loose, and we found her miles down the road in somebody's front yard. And so we obviously fixed the fence, but we thought we better be really cautious, and so we ate the cow. And don't escape from us, or else you're going to get eaten. So we're going to continue on in our series about I Love My Church, and today we're focusing on I Love My Community, and we're going to be talking about that this is one of God's plan that He has for the church, and that is to live in relationship with one another, to live connected lives with one another, with God and with each other. So what does this have to do with fences? And this is what we're going to be talking about this morning. So I want to look at Hebrews chapter 10, a passage that already was partially read to us by Mike. Let's look at this whole section from Hebrews 10, starting at verse 19. And it says this: "And so, dear brothers and sisters, we can boldly enter into heaven's most holy place because of the blood of Jesus. By His death, Jesus opened a new and life-giving way through the curtain into the most holy place. And since we have a great high priest who rules over God's house, let us go right into the presence of God with sincere hearts, fully trusting in Him. For our guilty consciences have been sprinkled with Christ's blood to make us clean, and our bodies have been washed with pure water. Let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep His promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of His return is drawing near. Now, before we dig into this passage, I want to return to this analogy about the fence that I was talking about earlier. And now that Laura and I are living here in Kitchener, we are living on Strasbourg Road, very close to the church here, and everybody, it seems, has a fence in their backyard, and we're no exception. We have our fence there as well. This is actually a picture of our front and backyard there. And the front yard is a little bit more inviting. Like, we don't have fences there. We invite people to come. We try to keep it presentable. You know, the grass is cut, and we have flowers there, and we try to trim our trees and we have a welcome mat in the front part of our door, and on and on. We try to make it presentable. A lot of people can come to our front yard, but the backyard is a little bit less accessible. In fact, you know, we have these fences there for more than one reason, and we're not ready to invite just anybody off the street into our backyard. And so we have some embarrassing things that may be in the backyard, like maybe the lawn isn't completely cut the way it should be, or maybe there's even doggy doo-doo in the backyard there, and we don't want people to see that. It's kind of embarrassing. And so the front yard is what we usually want people to see. That's a little bit more accessible, and we just, you know, that's a little bit more what we think is acceptable. But the backyard is by invitation only. And so this is where sometimes I think this is the way we relate to people. That if you imagine that your life is like a yard, the front yard is what we want people to see. We're okay with people seeing this. It's clean cut, it's pristine, it's orderly, it's presentable. And we've worked hard at presenting this front yard to people. But the backyard, maybe not so presentable. I don't want people to see some of the dog piles in my life. I don't want people to see the messes. I don't want people to know that I don't have everything together. And so I'm a little bit less willing to have people enter into that part of my life, because that's where the true me resides, in the backyard. Now, here's the thing about fences. God really is not a big fan of fences. And I'm not talking about the literal fence that you have around your property. I'm not suggesting you go home and rip it out. But I'm talking about the fences that we create in our own lives that are preventing others from having a connection with you. And so, what do we do when we have these fences in our life? How is it possible for us to function as a church the way God intended when we have these barriers? And so I want to talk about three things. The first thing is this. We need to know that Jesus crashed through the fence. Jesus crashed through the fence. And He is, this fence that exists between us and Him is the most serious barrier that exists. So the first part of this passage we read in Hebrews, it tells us this. Let me read it again for you, just that first section. And so, dear brothers and sisters, we can boldly enter into heaven's most holy place because of the blood of Jesus. By His death, Jesus opened a new and living way, a life-giving way, through the curtain, through the fence, through the barrier, into the most holy place. And since we have a great high priest who rules over God's house, let us go right into the presence of God with sincere hearts, fully trusting Him. For our guilty consciences have been sprinkled with Christ's blood to make us clean, and our bodies have been washed with pure water. So this is the image that the author is giving to us, and the Jew would understand this immediately, because in the Old Testament there was the picture of the tabernacle where the high priest, the person who represented the nation of Israel, would enter into the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies, once a year on behalf of the people to ask for forgiveness, to present a sacrifice before God in order for God to forgive the sins of the people. And so there was this kind of a scary moment for the priest to do this, because he's actually going into the most holy place. So we have the picture of the tabernacle, and this was actually a scary moment for the high priest because they're going into the presence of God. And you don't enter into the presence of God lightly. And so they actually started having bells around the bottom of their robe as they walked around. As long as they heard the bells, they know that the priest was still alive. God hadn't killed him yet. And they would actually tie a rope around his leg so that if he ever did die, they wouldn't dare go in. They would just pull him out with a rope. This was a very significant moment. And so the high priest, once a year, would go into the tabernacle and would present the sacrifice to God. And so now we have Jesus Christ as our high priest. And he is representing us before God. And he lays himself on the cross. He then becomes the sacrifice by which is presented before God, in the presence of God, the most holy place. And this sacrifice is effective, and it only has to be done once, because now the wall, the fence, the barrier that exists between us and God has been torn down, and we have this free access to God. So you have this makeshift fence that I made yesterday. I know it doesn't look like a fence, but use your imagination. And I'm going to try something. It worked. When Jesus died on the cross, that's what he did. He broke through the barrier that exists between us and God. His death made the difference. Well, so now we have free access to God. Now, Paul writes about this in much more detail in the book of Romans, that because this barrier has been broken, that all we need to do now is to accept that gift that he has given to us, to admit our own failures, and to be willing to receive the salvation that he has made for us, that we can enter now into the presence of God. In Romans 3:23, Paul talks about this giant fence that we all have. It says, "For everyone has sinned. All of us have fallen short of the glory of God." Romans 6:23, because of this fence we will never get to God. It says, "For the wages of sin is death." It sounds pretty hopeless, doesn't it? Romans 5:8, God knew that we would have this big fence even before we knew we had a yard. And he says, "But God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners." And Romans 10, verses 9 and 10, if we just admit that we have this fence constructed that prevents us from seeing God, this is what he says. "If you openly declare that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is by believing in your heart that you are made right with God, and it is by openly declaring your faith that you are saved." And then Romans 10:13, Jesus never denies a fence crashing party. He loves to break down fences. And it says, "For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." And so this is the beauty of what Jesus has done for us. He has crashed through this fence and allowed us to enter into the presence of God. But here's the problem. We love building fences. We love creating these barriers. And right from the very beginning, we were born with this big barrier that exists between ourselves and God. We are born into sin. And so we need to admit that this barrier exists and accept that Jesus died on the cross and that he crashed through this fence so that we can have a relationship with God, so that we can enter boldly into the most holy place with him. And so the question is, have you done that? Have you experienced drawing near to God? And when God invites us into that relationship with him, have you gone through that process of accepting, admitting, and accepting the gift of God? Because God is inviting us into that. He's inviting us into that communion. The barrier has been crashed down through Jesus Christ, and we can have communion with him. So that's the first thing we need to know. Know that Jesus has broken through that barrier. Secondly, let's allow others into your yard. We come to church on Sunday mornings, we enter this building, we sing some songs, the children get to play some games and sing songs as well, and sometimes we eat here, we often smile, we are saying good morning to people, and we're putting on this good face for a lot of us, and a lot of us, we are doing this behind a fence. Well, why do I say that? Didn't I just say that Jesus broke through the fence? Yes, he has, but we still like to build fences. We still like to draw some lines. So I want you to imagine that all of mankind is lined up behind this fence that God has, that is created between us and God. And when Jesus died on the cross, that fence was broken down, and so now there is no barrier between us and God, and therefore there's no barrier between me and all of the family of God. There's no barrier. It's all open. And yet we still like to make these barriers that exist around us and between us and others. And so sometimes we like to take these broken pieces and we try to mend them back and try to fit them back onto this once constructed fence. And we try to make it more secure so that people don't see everything. Even though Jesus has crashed through the fence, we want people only to see the pretty parts of our yard. We don't want them to see our dirty laundry. And so we keep constructing these walls. And yet don't forget what we talked about last week. Last week we said that we need to intentionally love the church, and we're not talking about loving this church, this building, or loving the programs. What that means is that we are loving one another. We are loving the church. We are loving the bride of Christ. We are loving one another. And so loving each other really is quite difficult. In fact, it's impossible to truly love others when we have these fences. So what do we do? What do we do when we have these fences erected, and myself included? We erect these fences. It's hard to truly know one another with these fences. So let's go back to that Hebrews passage. Verse 25, it says this, "And let us not neglect our meeting together." Now, for many years, pastors love this verse, right? Because they use this verse to make us feel guilty. You should be going to church. Do not forget meeting together, right? And they wag the finger like this, too. But it's much more than talking about coming to church on Sunday morning. What it's really talking about is true community with one another. What does it mean to meet together? To try, it's a daily occurrence. It's doing life together. It's actually knowing one another. It's entering to the lives of each other. So community means that we don't build fences. Community means that we go below the surface. It means that there's authenticity in our relationship. We go much deeper than is possible that we would have here on a Sunday morning, where we might know people's names, we might even know where they sit. But that's not the community that the author is talking about here. He's talking about going into each other's yards, even when there's a mess, because we desperately need it. And I've asked Heather Wellmell to come, and she's going to share a little bit of her story about the impact that her community has had in her life.
Hi. Ingrid and Richard have asked me to share my recent experience involving my relationship with and my love for my church community. First, let me paint you my picture. I'm sitting in my kitchen, having very slowly maneuvered my way down the stairs. My head is in my hands, and I am praying for strength. My back feels like it's breaking in two, and at the tender age of 54, I was going to say 24, at the tender age of 54, I'm wearing a diaper because of sudden onset incontinence. The phone rings and the orthopedic surgeon secretary calls and says, "Can you be in London in 90 minutes because the doctor wants to see you ASP?" And I said, "Sure." as I set down the phone. 90 minutes seems like a lot of time, but it's not. At that point in my life, 90 minutes was how long it took me to get my socks on. A couple hours later, I was in London being greeted by a doctor who said, "We need to do surgery on your back within 24 hours if you have any hope of regaining any of the things that you've lost so far because of your situation." I'm in London by myself, sitting in the doctor's office, crying, thinking, who do I call first? And the Holy Spirit told me, call Heinz Jansen. So I did. And I called him first and asked for prayers from my life group and asked him to forward my request to Doris so that I could have intercessory prayers. Then I thought, oh, my cat. So I had to contact Lynn Stewart because who else could look after my cat? After those phone calls were done, I could relax and I called the rest of my family. Okay, I've lost my place. So, I had a very complicated recovery, and it was long and arduous, and I had every complication, or most complications, aside from physical death, that could be expected from this procedure. It is here that I want to tell you guys all so much what a blessing that from then, when I was sitting in my kitchen, until now as I stand here before you, my health crisis has been. Because I've taken every step in the shadow of Christ Jesus and with my church community. I was held so firmly in the hearts and prayers of my church community, and I felt that in more ways than I can describe. Richard talked about building fences to keep people out. Well, my journey back to health started with a wrecking ball crashing through my fence. I couldn't survive without allowing people in and seeing me as I really am. Yes, I really do hoard pens and pencils. Yes, I truly do have a supply of scissors that would supply an army of seamstresses. And yes, I was a closet cigarette smoker and had lighters squirreled all over my house. I'm also just a tad bossy and high maintenance when I don't feel well. As my fence lay in ruins at my feet, it was amazing to me that my church community continued to love me, support me, and nurture me as my imperfections were all out to view. No secrets were left for me. People from my life group and church community fed me, ate with me, visited with me, encouraged me, scooped my kitty litter every day, and prayed with me. And if that wasn't enough, they also got my house ready to sell and moved me into my new home. To borrow from James' words, I consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, to have experienced the trials I have experienced. You have served me, you have loved me, simply because I am a member of this community. And for this, I am forever humbled. I pray that I will never forget the indescribable ways in which I have been blessed by all of you. And for this, I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Heather, and sharing from your heart and allowing a community surround her, and even seeing the doggy doo-doo, so to speak, in your yard, but experiencing the love that was meant to be and how the church was supposed to be. If you saw the TV show Home Improvement, you probably are familiar with this picture where Tim Allen is consulting with his neighbor, and you never saw Wilson's full face, right? You never saw. It was only a partial view of his face. And I think sometimes that's the way it is with us, that we only see a part of somebody's face. We only see one part. We don't see the whole thing. And it's hard for us to engage in any meaningful way with others when we can't see their whole face. We can't see what's going really on in their life. How can we come along somebody when we don't know that they're going through tragedy or through crisis? How can we embrace someone if we don't see their whole face? And I just can't walk alongside someone unless I know that there is issues in their marriage, or there is a fight that they've had. And we tend to build these fences, and we cannot have true community with one another. And so we have to get into someone's yard in order to fully know someone. And so the passage says, let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people are in the habit of doing, but encourage one another, especially now as we see the day of his return drawing near. And this is why we talk about life groups, and I will not stop talking about life groups and how important it is for us to be a part of a small group in which people know you and can enter into your life and pray for you and share with you and love on you. This is so important for us to be able to do this. But I know that not everyone's there. We're not all ready. This is kind of a scary thing for some people. And I know we have to take little steps. And so that's why we created this Guess Who's Coming to Dinner event. And this is really an intro to what it's like to go into someone's home, to have a meal together, to have some fellowship, and just start to open up and start to tear down those fences and to enter into meaningful fellowship with one another. So, if we're going to experience what God intended the church to be like, then we can't live behind fences. We can't live in isolation. We need one another in our yards. And finally, enjoy the company. Now, imagine yourself as a kid and you're going to a birthday party, and you go to this birthday party and it's really boring. There's only like a bowl of plain potato chips and some weak Kool-Aid, and that's it. There's nothing else. There's no games, there's no activities, no pin the tail on the donkey. It's a really lame birthday party, and you think, boy, they didn't even try to make this exciting. Well, this is what Hebrews says. He says, let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. In other words, let us think, let us consider, let us strategize, let us plan it out. Let's not just think that it's going to happen, but we actually have to be more than just intentional. We actually have to plan for it. We have to strategize for it. So think of entering into people's lives and having this connection with one another as creating a really successful birthday party. You are planning for it. You are strategizing for it to actually happen. And so that's what genuine community is, that we are motivating people to love and good deeds. We are helping them go beyond the walls and the fences that have been built around us. And so that may mean going and helping them paint their shed, or of pulling the weeds, or babysitting the kids, or bringing a meal in time of crisis. In our life group, we've talked about how if there's an issue in your life, there's a crisis, feel free to call us day or night. It doesn't matter. It's knowing when to invite people over for a meal, or to go do a double date, or to team up together, do some activity, or to serve in a church on a project. It's just helping one another and to motivate them to love and good deeds. And that's not going to happen without some strategy, without some planning, without some consideration. Think of ways in which you can lead people to love and good deeds. Now let me just give a couple of words of clarification. And that is, I don't want to suggest that this is going to have to happen with everybody here. It just is not possible for you to break through the fence in every area with every person that you meet. I understand that. But we do need a small group of people in which we are willing to do that with. We need a group of people that know us and that can step into our backyard. And so sometimes we need to take baby steps. It's not going to happen overnight. We start to allow people to see more and more, and developing this deep and meaningful relationship with a small group of people. It takes time for trust and authenticity. Also, I encourage you to take ownership of this process, that you're not sitting back and waiting for somebody to do it for you, but you are actually actively involved in doing it yourself. This is not everyone else's job, this is everyone's job. And so if you're waiting for somebody to do it, then you're sitting in the wrong spot. So here's the question for you this morning. And you can rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high. What number would you place on the effort that you're putting into intentionally, strategically connecting with one another? What's that number? And then think about what would it take for you to increase that number by 1 or by 2 to intentionally become all that God intended the church to be. So this morning we are going to be entering into communion. And communion, of course, is a reminder of what Jesus did on the cross as he broke through the sin barrier and has provided that freedom for us to have that relationship with God and the relationship that we can have with one another. And so the bread and the juice are symbolic of the body and the blood of Jesus that was shed for us. But it is more than symbolic in the sense that this is real. This has to be true. This has to be meaningful for us, that as we participate in the bread and the cup, it actually is the freedom that we have to connect with God and with each other. And so when we join together, and just logistically, I'm going to invite you to come at the front, and then this half of the church will flow that way, and this half of the church will flow this way, and then there's also a station at the back if you want to. But as you are gathered together in these groups of people, I want you to think to yourself, what a beautiful picture it is of this mystery, this profound, beautiful picture of being one with one another. The barriers have been broken, and we can eat of this bread and this juice as a reminder of what Jesus has done so that we can express this oneness and the beauty of becoming one flesh. And so we invite you into this as an opportunity to reflect on Jesus' gift for all of us, not only in our relationship with Him, but our relationship with one another. Let's pray together. Jesus, we come before you and we are so grateful for the incredible gift that we have to know you, to enter into the Holy of Holies, to be able to not be worried about what's going to happen, but we know that your love is so profound and so deep that you welcome us and you have provided the means for that to happen. And God, we sometimes neglect that, and we sometimes construct fences that prevents us because we're hiding, we're ashamed, we're trying to protect things in our life that we're not happy about. But God, you know us in and out, and you welcome us, and you provide this beautiful relationship. And God, for our relationship with one another, it too often exists in partial view as we construct these fences, as we prevent others from seeing the true us. And God, may we be willing to break those barriers and to realize that we need one another. You have created us to be in that communion with one another. And so as we participate in this communion, may it be real. May it not just be a theological concept. May it not just be a word that we use. May it not just be a ritual that we process through, but may it be meaningful and may it be real for us as we are gathered people who love you and are in desperate need of your love and of each other. And so we pray this in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.